Hi, I'm Lisa Comfort from Sew Over It, and I'm going to show you how to insert a concealed zip. I've got one here on this dress, and you can see a concealed zip is one which you can't see the teeth, so it's pretty much looking like a seam. You're going to need a regular zip foot and also a concealed zip foot. To start with, I'm going to take my zip and open it up and placing it right side down onto the side of the dress. Make sure that at the top of the zip where the slider will go to, you're not going all the way to the top of your garment, because you'll have to have a seam allowance to finish that top edge, be it your neckline or your waistband. You'll need that seam allowance. You need to make sure that from the teeth of the zip to the edge of the fabric, you're also getting 1.5 centimeters, again if you're using one of our patterns, or whatever your seam allowance is. Pin that with the pins facing up towards the top of the zip in a parallel way. Make sure that your seam allowance is also accurate. This is now ready to sew, so I'm going to put my regular zip foot on my machine, and I'm going to make sure that we're using the right side. So for this one, we need to make sure that the left edge is open. I'm then going to tuck that under. Change your stitch length to 5. First, all we're going to do is just stitch down the middle of the tape. Now this stitch is not that important in terms of neatness, so if you do waver off a little bit, that's okay, but just make sure the zip doesn't move. I'm not doing a reverse stitch at the beginning because this is a temporary stitch. And then, if you see, you've got a stitch running all the way down the middle of the tape. So now we need to do the stitch where we go really close to the teeth so that it stays concealed. So I'm going to put my invisible or concealed zip foot on my machine now. Okay, and I'm going to tuck in the teeth into one of the little channels that's underneath the foot. So there's little channels in a concealed zip foot to help you stitch in the right place. You will need to open out the teeth so that they are open when they're going into the channel. Put your machine back onto a regular stitch length, and this time we're doing our back stitch at the beginning. Peel it back for the initial bit so that you're confident that it's stitching in the right place. The teeth should be going right up against this T-bar, and this should be open, so you won't be able to get past that. I often recommend that people choose a longer zip than they need, and it just makes this bit easier so that you can finish at the necessary point. Okay, and then back stitch in the normal way. So now when we open that out, you can see there's a stitch right in the groove there. And if we were to just flip that so that how it will look when it's finished, you can see that the teeth are essentially concealed. Now for the next side, this is where a lot of people get confused because concealed zips look a bit odd when you're putting them in, and I often say if it looks wrong, it's probably right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this side, and that side would go on that way. And remember, you always want the tape lining up with the raw edge of your seam. If you've got it that way round, then you can't go wrong. Do be careful though that you haven't twisted your zip as well. If this was a made garment, we'd essentially this part of it would be looking at the inside of the garment, and this would be on the right side. I've put a seam into this practice piece so that you can see how we would make sure that we get that lined up beautifully like it is here. Because just like lining up at the top, it would look awful if it wasn't lined up at this point. If you close the zip, mark with a little snip on the unstitched side of the zip tape exactly where it's lining up with the waist seam. Then you've got that to sit on top of your waist seam as you're lining up the opposite side. That has to line up, and at the top it also has to line up with the top of the fabric. And as long as your sewing was accurate when you were making the rest of the dress, there shouldn't be an issue there. So that's now pinned in the same way as I pinned that side, with the pins facing up towards the zip. And then I'm going to do exactly the same, using first the regular zip foot and then the concealed zip foot to stitch this in. So now the zip is stitched in on both sides, and if you close it, you'll see that your seam is lined up. To finish off, make sure you give it a nice press, but be gentle, and you might need to put a piece of cloth in between just so you don't do any hard pressing and creating any ridges. And there you have a perfectly concealed zip